सारे काम जरूरी हैं, बट मेरे लिए मुझे लगता है कि जो काम ने मुझे चुना, मैंने काम को चुना, उसमें मानव निर्माण का काम मुझे बहुत सेंट्रल लगता है कि अगर हम बेहतर इंसान का बनाने का मतलब बना तो नहीं सकते, बट वो इकोसिस्टम तैयार करेंगे तो वो जो भी करेंगे वो बहुत शानदार करेंगे। तो वो था कि उसमें क्या हम राजनीति के साथ वो कर सकें, बिकॉज उस टाइम तक मेरी नज़र में कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऐसे नहीं कर रही थी।
जब हम पॉलिटिक्स की बात करते हैं लोगों को 9 PM डिबेट सूझता है और फिर लगता है कि यार इसमें तो हम कैसे जा सकते हैं, पर अगर हमें एक्चुअली कहीं if we want to encourage young people to take a first step, we need to break the narrative of what the current politics is, and for that understand what current politics is.
Restoration in Progress, Episode 5, with Indian School of Democracy.
Something that's very interesting is both of you working together. I think even one of the ways in which we see men and women interact with each other in society is also classified according to certain norms, right? And you both seem to share a very deep friendship. And this, I'm sure, it's not about conflicts or disagreements. It's more about what you have in common, right? So maybe you can just talk about the journey of ISD. I've heard the story a few times, but we'd love for you to share. This will be the first time for Vishwas as well. Yes, so just how did this happen, and what has brought you here?
So I think before ISD, I was working with young people with an organization called Youth Alliance, and again the core idea was that that we all have innate goodness within us, and if we get a space and ecosystem wherein we can get in touch with our inner goodness, I think the choices which we will make after that will be very different. And the whole idea of like how do we heal ourselves so that whatever we do, we contribute as a more person, someone who is healed or who is in the process of healing, and that will have a huge difference. And seeing that, I think 8-9 years of Youth Alliance and so many young people finding that path, making those choices which are very different and which are very significant in their own way, I think this whole thought came that can we do something similar in politics? And why politics? Because this whole idea that politics does something significant to the society has been there for a while. And this whole idea that young people can be enabled to be better human beings in a given ecosystem, in a given atmosphere, or in a given community, the possibility for me got established because of Youth Alliance's work. So I think then I think we both met, our common friend, now Hemakshi's husband, connected us that you are also thinking similar, and I know Hemakshi who is also thinking on the similar lines. So we started talking, and that's how this whole idea shaped in. Can we start an organization that will nurture principled politician? So a mix of it is like the adult learning, leadership, and the part of it is that people who are working on ground in grassroots politics. So then we started talking, and then it became reality.
For me, it was a very head decision in some way, and then it took a while for it to become a heart decision. Not a decision, I think more manifestation, because for me it was like politics is not working, it needs to work. So something needs to change in how we're talking about democracy, experiencing democracy, and just the social fabric that makes up democracy. So I think that was the dilemma, and I would speak to my partner at that time and say that I think the solution is to work with young people, because maybe older people, they're too ingrained in their own ways, and someone working with young people on their inner journeys was like in our known circle was Prakhar. So I was like, oh, maybe Youth Alliance should do this. Maybe like I'll just write something through that. And then I think Tarun heard it for a while, and then he said like, and they were sharing office space at that time. So he just connected us. And I remember the first conversation that we had in 2017. I had just moved back to India, and Prakhar had been thinking, like, ISD had taken shape in his head. And he told me that, Hemakshi, would you want to like be part of this journey? And I remember listening to it very deeply, being very excited at the resonance of it. But for some reason, I said no. I mean, I know the reasons, but I was just like, no, it's not fitting into the life plan that I have right now. Like, my life plan is this. So it's not fitting in. But he didn't give up, and like we kept talking, and I think even that conversation really resonated with me and stayed with me. And then as it happened, I hated the job that I ended up taking, and so like when we would meet, these conversations were interesting, and I think that's where I started giving it a lot more heart and emotions to it. And there was also yeah, I think the values aspect of it was pretty common for both of us.
Till then, I think 16, 17, at least I did not encounter anyone in the country who's doing similar work of preparing people for electoral politics. And I think that became something exciting. अब लगता है कि बहुत कठिन चुना है.
And क्या timing पे चला
क्या timing
जब
पे
ऐसे
लगता है.
राजनीतिक काफी टसल चालू है.
Yeah.
So just then, like, how did it take shape? Like the work itself, like I mean, this was the intention, right? क्योंकि ये करना है. फिर ये जो form आप जो programs आप run करते हो, like how did they come into being? You could maybe share a little bit about each of the programs.
Yeah. I think we did start things and we learned, but we invested a little bit of time in knowing what the problem was. कि जो young लोग हैं जिनके साथ हम काम करना चाहते हैं, उनके fears और aspirations क्या है politics के बारे में. जो लोग अभी politics में हैं, क्या वो हमेशा से ऐसे थे? हम बोलना तो आसान है कि सब politicians खराब है, but actually not everyone starts that way. There's something about the system which is the way it is, which is making people behave a certain way. So can we start understanding what that system is instead of just poking holes in it or blaming it, and then have the idealism to reimagine something. Through Democracy Express, हम लोग at least 4 states में जाते हैं 10 दिन के लिए एक बस में, और लोगों से बात करते हैं, पॉलिटिशियन से मिलते हैं, जो सरपंच है, काउंसलर है, स्टूडेंट पॉलिटिशियंस हैं, और एमपी, एमएलए, गवर्नर, सीएम्स भी हैं, ताकि हम वो इंसान को जान पाए, सिर्फ वो पॉलिटिशियन को ना जान पाए कि वो उनकी जर्नी क्या रही है, उनकी स्ट्रगल्स क्या रही है, और उससे कुछ सीख पाए. और ये जो 3 चीजें जो हमने बताई, स्किल्स, कम्युनिटी, इनर वर्क, वो तो कांस्टेंट रहे. और उसमें 30 पार्टिसिपेंट्स थे और उसमें से 15 विमेन थी तभी भी. पर जो कॉन्वर्सेशंस हो रही थी विमेन हॉस्टल्स में, वो बहुत अलग थी, क्योंकि चैलेंजेस जो महिलाएं फेस करती है पॉलिटिक्स में वो अलग थी, वो बहुत क्लैरिटी से पता कर रहा था. तो दैट्स हाउ शी रिप्रेजेंट्स वाज बोर्न. We felt there is a need to do something for women where the conversation is rooted in the reality and the lived experiences of women in politics. And I think it remains one of our favorite programs that we do, because the feminine energy does something, it creates something. There is a vulnerability, there's authenticity, and a very different kind of courage than what politics is used to. And I think that really energizes us as we do it. And then we do a flagship program, which is a 9-month program called The Good Politician, which is for people who are slightly more advanced in their political journey, who are going to contest in next month, in a year or so, at a local level. So I think the grounding of wanting to be at grassroots level, so that change happens in periphery, and change, when it happens at periphery, there is an organic way that it happens. It questions things, but not in a way that's volcanic, but in a way that can that has space to experiment in some ways or the other. So I think grassroots politics became very integral to what we are trying to do, working with people who are also facing the problem, and who are not people who just have solutions in their head, but also people who live the reality or the problems that they're trying to solve.
So I think for the people we are working with, I think one thing that we felt early on is that there's a certain kind of section that comes into politics, and often that section is not like the top class of the society. It is often the people who have gone through their struggles, and their commitment towards improving is sometimes much higher. So I think in any given program, 70% or so people come from other marginalized religion or caste or class, because we know that that is one of the most important section. And also the belief also comes that I can never represent someone whose identity I've never lived. I can try to, I can empathize a little bit, but I think it is important in a democracy that the representation comes from the people who are living it on a daily basis. And I think that becomes a very important part. The current political spaces, all the elected positions, we often see representatives maybe from that caste or that class or that religion, but we often don't see the people coming from exactly that strata who is suffering on a daily basis. So I think that became a very important part of our program, that representation has to be far less tokenistic, and it has to become much more real. So that's what is the cohort is made up of. The whole idea of sustainability, that the business will come in and profit and loss will balance out, doesn't make sense. Someone has to take the cost of it, because someone has also had too much on their table, and someone has to give it so that someone else can also come up and receive this program. And maybe their way of giving is not financial capital. Their way of giving is the service that they are doing for the community, for the people. So yeah, that's been right.
Sustainability. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is of access, right? Like to be able to open this up and just even establishing ISD in India. Like how has that experience been for you from like an organizational point of view? Like one is of course working with the people and bringing them on board, and there would be a lot that you would have to do to kind of systemically facilitate this access, right? Like one is tokenism. It's a big part of politics in India, right? Like how does it look? And it's not just politics, in other aspects of life also. We see optics being such a big factor influencing choice, right? In other institutions as well. So, like, how do you feel like your role as people who are at the moment being the key facilitators of this experience? Like, how have you kind of engaged with the system to generate this access?
So I can share part of it. One is that very few people know how to build an institution like this, and including both of us also, and outside also that there are advisors and mentors who can tell you how to build a non-profit, which is very in education, youth leadership, because the work has been done.
Right.
Political leadership comes at a very unique space, which is not often done. So when something is not done, the expertise to build something like that is not exclusive. You have to like take water from multiple bucket to fill your bucket, because that ready-made idea, concept, book is not written about it. We were lucky to have someone who believed in us, and slowly, sometimes I generally feel I think it is that time that is supporting us more than us doing this work. That we are living in times when some people, if the society doesn't experiment on something like this, they will feel guilty. We should have tried something like this. And then chance is there that we came in the times when the democracy really seems like in a very different state. The politics of the country is changing, of the world is changing. और उसमें हमें ये आइडिया आ गया तो ऐसे लग रहा है कि पतझड़ के मौसम में हमारे पास एक कोई मटका था या कोई गमला था जिसमें हम बीज बो रहे हैं, तो सबको लग रहा है कि शायद पेड़ निकल ही आए.
I think something I want to mention is the tension that we experienced in the early years, that we had all the support. जैसे प्रखर ने बहुत अच्छा metaphor use किया कि शायद ड्रॉट चल रहा था और यहाँ पे एक गमला था जहाँ पे शायद कुछ सीड्स थे जो लोग वाटर करना चाहते थे, पर there were people, and I want to say 80% of the people we met कि politics शब्द हटा दो, अब इसको आप ग्रासरूट्स लीडरशिप बोल दो, सोशल लीडरशिप बोल दो, डेवलपमेंटल लीडरशिप बोल दो, बोले काम यही करो, पर पॉलिटिक्स शब्द हटा दो, you are increasing the problems you will face. And I think like the number of times we would have heard this with something inside of us. I think most of the times we were on the same page, but if I gave up, he was there, and when he gave up, like कर ही देते change, I was like नहीं करेंगे, क्योंकि a part of our work is to reclaim the word politics. कि हम चाहते हैं कि वो politics, जो हमारा idea of politics है वो बहुत sacred है, that it is one of the most sacred vehicles of serving the society. Can we really reclaim it by the work that we are doing? That when our politicians go ahead and serve, people will say, हाँ ऐसे भी हो सकते हैं politicians. I think wanted to mention that, and that impacted the access, right? Like हम बहुत door shut हुए जब हम बोलते थे politics. हम भी अभी भी काफी फंडिंग के लिए एलिजिबल ही नहीं है क्योंकि हम बोलते हैं पॉलिटिक्स में काम कर रहे हैं, पर आई थिंक हम बहुत वी आर वेरी ओके विद द चॉइस बिकॉज पीपल सी द करेज और सीड्स ऑफ द करेज दैट हाँ अब इस टाइम में पॉलिटिक्स में काम कर रहे हैं और बहुत इंटेंशनली काम कर रहे हैं.
दो और आई थिंक जो वर्ड की चॉइस है उससे दो चीजें और होती हैं. एक है कि कुछ लोग जो करेजियस है, जो करना चाहते हैं, वो आगे आके कर भी रहे हैं. उन्हें भी पता है, क्या पता ये ना वो करें. एंड आई कैन as I'm saying, I can see the faces of the supporters who are just seeing it as an experiment कि दो young लोग experiment करना चाहते हैं, and I don't want to be someone who did not trust them in this time. So I think वो भी है कि because we've chosen the word politics, they are courageously standing with us and supporting us.
I think it's very powerful to be non-partisan at a time where everybody is picking parties. And parties, when I say parties, I don't just mean political parties. I mean different ideologies and different ways of living. And we are so attached to our opinions, right? So something that I have learned with my connection with ISD is just the objectivity in different things, right? I was a part of She Represents ka first cohort, just for FYI. And something that I very, very clearly remember was this one activity where we had to look at, we had to listen to some politician from a different party with whom, like, you know, there were a lot of ideological differences, and we had to listen to that conversation, and then we had to actually break down how we experienced that. Why was it triggering, right? And it's such an important question to ask, like, why do we react to something? And my question to you is that, what is it like being non-partisan at a time where everybody is in parties?
तो आई थिंक वो ज्यादा हमारे मन में सवाल नहीं था कि क्यों हम नॉन पार्टिसान हैं, वो बहुत क्लियर था और है भी अभी, क्योंकि यही एक रास्ता है कि एक्चुअली डेमोक्रेसी सुधर पाएगी जब हमारे पास ऐसे लीडर्स होंगे जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में रूटेड है, और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की जो वैल्यूज हैं, इक्वालिटी, फ्रेटर्निटी, कि हम एक दूसरे से कनेक्टेड हैं एज पीपल ऑफ दिस लैंड, वो आई थिंक अभी भी बिलीफ है, पर मुश्किल है क्योंकि हम लोग भी वो ईवीएम पे कोई ना कोई बटन तो एज इंडिविजुअल्स प्रेस करते हैं. हमारी भी बिलीव्स हैं अबाउट, एंड बिलीव्स आर नॉट जस्ट अबाउट व्हिच पॉलिटिकल पार्टी वी सपोर्ट, बट एक्चुअली एट अ मैक्रो लेवल व्हाट काइंड ऑफ सोसाइटी डू वी वांट, व्हाट इज इट दैट वी इमेजिन फॉर आवर कंट्री टू बी, एंड देन पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज टेकिंग फॉर्म. बट at least if I were to speak for myself, I know that I don't genuinely align with everything a party says. And being non-partisan is liberating in some ways because I'm not married to any party at all. In fact, I've voted 4 times in my life, 4 or 5 times, and I've voted for a different party almost every single time because I've asked myself, who do I want to support? What do they stand for? Does my vision for society align with their vision, and also the choices that they're making as representatives?
मतलब एक चीज बस उसमें है कि नॉन पार्टिसान का प्रिंसिपल डायलॉग्स भी आता है कि अगर सोसाइटी इतना फैब्रिकेटेड है, अलग अलग तरफ जा रहे हैं और इतने गेटोज या बॉक्सेस बने हैं, तो वो शायद कॉन्वर्जेशन से ही हील होगा. उस कॉन्वर्जेशन के बिना वो नहीं बदलेगा. और अगर हम किसी एक पार्टी के साथ काम करेंगे, किसी एक आइडियोलॉजी के साथ करेंगे, तो हम एक को पूरी तरह से दरकिनार कर देंगे. और आज सिस्टम ऐसा बना हुआ है कि आप जैसे ही कुछ एक स्टैंड लेते हैं, एंगेजमेंट आपका घट जाता है. तो एसडी ऑल्सो बिकम्स अ प्लेस जहाँ पे अलग अलग पार्टी के लोग भी आते हैं. तो चाहे वो पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स हो, अगर आप देखेंगे, आपने अनुभव किया भी होगा कि अलग अलग पार्टी के लोग आएंगे पार्टिसिपेंट में भी और स्पीकर्स में भी, फैसिलिटेटर में भी, और वो एक जगह बन जाती है जहाँ पे हम एक दूसरे को अपने लेवल के बियॉन्ड सुन तो पाएं. बिकॉज जब हम एक दूसरे को सुनेंगे तब शायद कुछ अंदर खुलेगा, और जब खुलेगा तो थोड़ी हीलिंग होगी. और जब तक हम सुन नहीं पाएंगे तब तक तो हम अपने बॉक्स में वो जगह ही नहीं दे रहे हैं. आई थिंक रूमी का कोई कोट है, आई थिंक हीलिंग हैपेंस फ्रॉम द ब्रोकन पार्ट्स, जहाँ पे जब लाइट जाती है, कुछ कोट एग्जैक्टली. हाँ, हीलिंग भी शायद उसमें कहीं है,
but इंटेंशन में है,
आइडिया वही है ना, मतलब लाइट जाएगी, वुंड होगा तभी तो हीलिंग होगी. वो वुंड ही जब खुलेगा नहीं, तो वो आई थिंक डायलॉग का प्रिंसिपल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बन जाता है कि बिना डायलॉग के तो नहीं होगा. जितना रिजिड होते जाएंगे, आई थिंक इफ यू सी आवर कंट्री एंड अदर कंट्रीज आल्सो, आई थिंक लिबरल्स हो या फिर कंजर्वेटिव हो, एग्जैक्ट सेम बिहेवियर है. द टूल्स ऑफ engagement, the terms of engagement, the vocabulary of engagement is exactly same. तो चाहे आप लिबरल साइड से देखें तो वो भी उसी हेट और वायलेंट वर्ड्स का यूज कर रहे हैं जो आप कई बार अगर एकदम राइट विंग या एक्सट्रीमिज्म वाले साइड पे जाएंगे, एक्सट्रीमिज्म में, उसमें भी सेम चीज कर रहे हैं. तो बहुत अंतर अभी बचा नहीं है. शायद स्पेक्ट्रम में थोड़ा अंतर होगा, बट टूल्स ऑफ एंगेजमेंट बहुत सिमिलर है. वो कैंसिल कल्चर लिबरल साइड में भी उतना स्ट्रॉन्ग है जितना आपने जिसको अपोज करते करते आप वही बन गए. और ऐसे थ्योरी ऑफ ऑपरेशन में बोलते भी हैं कि आप कई बार ऑपरेसर के खिलाफ जाते जाते आप खुद ही ऑपरेसर बन जाते हैं. तो साइकिल को तोड़ने के लिए डायलॉग बिकम्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट मीडियम. हाउ डू वी ब्रेक दैट साइकिल?
So are there any particular areas that you are looking at through your work? Politics is a big area. It's so much, starting from family to society to religion, so much, so many aspects to it. So any particular aspects that you are focusing on, or you're looking to change through your work?
I did not get it.
Are there any specific, correct me if I'm wrong, but are there any specific paths through our form of politics? Like, are we looking at society changing, self-changing? What is it? I think like it's a lot, but what would be our focus? That's the question.
I think core thing is around role modeling. That if we can have more principled elected politician, I think our core focus is on the elected politician. We don't, as of now, we don't want to work with people majorly. Some for sure will come from different walks of life. They can be activists, journalists also, but essentially I think 80% people maybe we want to work with are people who want to contest election. because that is somewhere wherein the whole slippery slope is. I can run Indian School of Democracy with utmost integrity and honesty, with all moral high ground. I can run Teach for India or Youth Alliance or whatever organization. But can I do that being an elected politician? Can I contest election with that? Because the challenge happens over there. We are not an organization that will claim that 10 people, the ISD has impacted this many. So we are not on that race, that we are very clear. And mostly we are not going to write also that Indian School of Democracy has impacted 10 million people in last. That's not the narrative, that's not the vocabulary that we want to use. But we would love to write that there are 300 elected politicians from Indian School of Democracy over the last 20 years who are now like changing the way the constituencies are looking. So that's something we would love to. And the whole idea is that more organizations come out of IC, more people choose to come into politics, more of our alumni start working with their communities, with women in the different self-help groups. So that's what the whole idea is. You are saying something, sorry.
So we were also discussing that the problem is that people who come into politics probably come to actually make a difference, but they get into the system and the system gets the better of them. So here, when you try to create the role models, are you also looking at supporting them through their journeys as leaders?
So the three things that I think Hemakshi mentioned in the beginning, the inner river, hard skills in the community. So community becomes the central part of it. Okay, until and unless there will be 6-7 people who are going to anchor me, who are our conscience keeper, who will ask me questions or who will hold me when I'm falling. Only that can shift it. It can't be like an individual on this, but it can be, but it's very difficult in today's time to be a Buddha and keep walking the path of Dhamma. And he also had, I'm sure, his own community. So I think that becomes a very integral part. And how do we spark that in the cohort so that they become each other's co-anchor?
I think one thing I want to mention is the critical mass wala part. कि जो हम सुनते हैं कि when we've spoken to people that they're amazing people, but when they enter politics, things change. But this community also translates to once they're in the system, yes, 9 out of 10 people around them are really changed by the system, but there is that one person who hopefully is an ISD alum, but someone who's part of something like ISD or is rooted in the idea of principal leadership. How can we gain strength from each other? And that's how the critical mass is going to change. Because the stories we hear right now are of the corruption, the amount spent in elections. But can we have stories? Can we very consciously be connected to the stories who are doing politics differently? And then that critical mass changes the narrative for other people. So lighthouses is a narrative, as a metaphor we use quite often. Can our alumni be those lighthouses who inspire or change the way politics is done, and inspire each other also, inspire themselves, each other, and then hopefully the rest of the country. And again, no arrogance about the fact that only ISD alumni will be lighthouses. We just need more lighthouses, however they get to be that. Yeah.
And I think we can just kind of shift the lens inwards and just talk about both of you as individual selves, right? Like, how has this journey, being on this journey, impacted, or how have you seen it manifest within yourself in the choices that you make as individuals? So yeah, just wherever this goes.
I think एक चीज़ जो ISD में आने के बाद से हुई है वो है कि कांस्टेंट, स्पेशली जब रेजिडेंशियल्स होते हैं तो आप जिनके साथ में काम कर रहे हो, जिनके तो पूरा आइडिया भी सर्वोदय का है, वो बहुत बड़ा अपने ऊपर तो सवाल उठाते हैं कि मेरा जीवन कैसा है। अगर मैं बात सर्वोदय की कर रहा हूँ तो मेरा जीवन का इनपुट आउटपुट है, जो भी बोले, रिसोर्सेज का यूटिलाइजेशन से लेके मेरा अपना आउटलुक जीवन के प्रति कैसा है, तो वो आई थिंक एक कांस्टेंट सवाल रहता है। वो आई थिंक पहले भी रहता था, बट अब पहले जिस ग्रुप के लोग साथ काम करते थे वो थोड़ा अलग था। अभी जिनके साथ काम करते हैं वो थोड़ा अलग है, एडल्ट भी हैं, एवरेज एज 30-35 साल के आसपास होती है। एंड देन सीइंग द लाइफ चैलेंजेस दे आर इन, द चॉइसेस दैट दे आर मेकिंग, बीइंग इन द चैलेंजेस दैट दे आर इन, आई थिंक इट मेक्स मी थिंक अ लॉट अबाउट माय ओन पर्सनल लाइफ, हाउ एम आई लिविंग, what do I need to let go of, and then on the other side understanding my own privileges in different ways, being in the country I am today with a upper caste, Hindu, male, English speaking, so many like different, all body parts functioning, seems like all are functioning. I think then a lot of questions start coming in. Okay, करूँ क्या अभी मैं इतना सारा इस पहाड़ पे बैठ के what authority or what moral authority do I have to ask someone to walk on the path of Sarvodaya? That at some level we do through our programs, through our institution. तो वो एक constant रहता है. Sometimes it becomes guilt, sometimes it gives energy to do more, and it is just making me realize more of my edges, which is I think in turn making me more acceptance of other person's edges, because I am realizing my own edges so much, especially in the last 2-3 years, that my acceptance for the world, I think at some level, or the people around me is becoming much more higher. जब अपने ब्लाइंड जोन में रहता हूँ और अपने एजेस नहीं दिखते हैं तो फिर सामने वाले के एजेस ज़्यादा दिखते हैं, तो वो आई थिंक मेरे लिए काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग जर्नी है पिछले आई थिंक नॉट जस्ट 2 साल बट पिछले 4-5 साल में मैं देख रहा हूँ कि आई थिंक पोस्ट 30s आई एम रियलाइजिंग दिस कि द एक्सेप्टेंस लेवल इज़ गोइंग प्रीटी हाई. तो अभी जो मिलते हैं मुझे यूथ अलायंस के 10 साल पहले प्रोग्राम के लोग और अभी बोलते हैं कि सॉफ्ट हो गए हो आप.
Gender has been a very empowering identity for me and it continues to do so, but I've also found myself using gender as an excuse, a clutch, excuse for anger, a clutch for multiple things. I think being in ISD, because we speak a lot about women in politics in our team, and then who I am, and we speak a lot about leadership, and I think like feminine leadership. There was a time in the first year when we started ISD, I was like, I don't want any gyan from any man who's talking about leadership, because I found, and it was coming from a space of resistance, because everything I was doing was defined by how a woman should be as a leader, how a man should be as a leader. And so I went through a year of not listening to a man about leadership, not reading. And then I think towards the end of the year, it was just coming from a space of realizing how much I'm resisting my own gender fluidity. And I think that opened up things for me. And I do want to give credit to Prakhar because it's not that he is a male leader and I'm a female leader. It's just almost opposite of that, but it's making me see things in a more gender fluid way. It's making me see leadership in a more gender fluid way and ascribing feminine and masculine to leadership, but not attaching certain qualities to it. It's just who I am choosing to show up. I think one thing definitely is there's no exit, and not an exit from, oh, I want to leave the country, or oh, I want to quit this job, because those options don't exist for me because of the choice I made, and I'm very happy with that choice. Just living with the discomfort, what we were speaking about, I found myself being very patient with it in the last 4 years as compared to what I was earlier. And again, I think on most days it's an enjoyable journey, just because what brings me to life is learning. What brings me to life is being on the threshold of growth, not being comfortable. And the last 4 years have been that, whether it's asking questions of what, with all my privileges, is it justified for me to work with people who don't have some of those basic life privileges and yet are making the choices they are making? From asking myself those questions to really seeing, like, on a day-to-day basis, am I living those values or not? How much am I living those values or not? And I think, so the possibility of that is amazing, and I love that ISD kind of does that to me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is really beautiful.